I'm Greg Tsontakis, member of the Resurrection Church for close to 30 years. I taught at Stony Brook University in the Graduate School of Social Science, art history, and how art relates to subject areas for 17 years. I'll be speaking about Hagia Sophia, its historical antecedents and its importance not only to the Orthodox Church, but also to the world. Originally, Constantine was the Roman emperor at the time, and he found that Christianity took root better in the East than it did the West. And so he was looking to pull up stakes from Rome. Two cities probably, they had greater populations than Rome, and that was Antioch and Alexandria. But he settled on what is present-day Istanbul, what we know in the Orthodox Church as Constantinople. Constantine's son would actually build the first Hagia Sophia on the site that it is today. He built it in 350, and he built it in the basilica style, which was early Christian architecture. A basilica is a Roman word that really means loosely a town hall. And the first Hagia Sophia was built on that premise, and so was the later building that we'll later talk about. It was a dual building because it was the basilica style. It functioned as a town hall for the emperor, of course, and also for a religious center as well, being a church. But what they found was the two, the religious and the civil, did not always agree on a number of issues. And in 398, John Chrysostom, St. John, opposed the emperor's policies and thoughts. And so the emperor, with his power, he banished him. And in retaliation, they're not sure how, but the church was burned down. It would be rebuilt, and it would be rebuilt in 415, and it would be burnt again. In 532, the Emperor Justinian set out to build the Hagia Sophia as we know it. It was dedicated in 537. That's a building program of 5 years. The haste of the labor is still seen in the building today. There are columns that are unfinished, as if they were going to go back and do the finishing later. But what they found was that the concept was quite novel in the dome construction. It was the largest dome in the world for many years. It would not be equal till the 15th century. The building, of course, was 537 was when it was consecrated. It remained an Orthodox church, and its construction and even some of the features of the building were uniquely Byzantine. I think the dome structure itself has older antecedents, and I mean very, very old. I think back to the Mycenaean era. If you look at the Treasury of Atreus, you'll see a dome-like structure. So it was in the sensibility of the Byzantines. Constantine he may have established the city, but it was Justinian that built the church. And he called from throughout the empire, uh, stone from everywhere. You don't get that sense when you visit Hagia Sophia today, and I think I know why. I'm talking about green marble, rose marble, white marble, stunning stones of porphyry, uh, and all of this went into the fabrication of the church. Uh, if you have marble floors at home, you will find that they require maintenance. You need to periodically sand and polish them. This has not been done in Hagia Sophia for many years. So the overall look when you walk into the building, and I was there 14 years ago, I would say it's far from the original intention. Uh, the dome was surrounded by 40 windows, and the amount of light that came in was dazzling. Later, injuries to the building would wall up some of the lower windows, and I don't think you quite get the same effect. Also, part of the Byzantine sensibility was the use of what they call tesserae. That is the mosaics. Tesserae are actually glass pieces with gold foil, gold leaf, and then another layer of glass, and then put back in the kiln. When they are set at slightly different angles. So the effect is to sparkle and to have an absolutely overwhelming effect. The building has that pull, even to this day. You walk in it and you know that you're in a sacred space, because you are. And it's been a sacred space for many, many, many years, not only for the Christian Orthodox. Constantinople, because of the strategic place in a narrow strait connecting the Black Sea with the Mediterranean, trade routes between East and West, was bitterly fought over and over again. And it was besieged actually 35 times in its history. The fall of Constantinople was to the Ottoman Turks, and the Sultan Mehmed II, when he first entered Hagia Sophia, this is a Muslim, he fell to his knees and he prayed, because that's the power of a sacred space. He, for 12 years, did not, in fact, remove the Christian iconography or the mosaics. They would be plastered over by more fundamentalist Muslims later. And in a way, when they plastered them over, because they found that it was blasphemous to depict humans in sacred spaces, they unwittingly they preserved them, and that is the truth of it. The dome was extremely ambitious, and it would in fact collapse shortly after the original dome was put in. The dome endured 4 collapses in its history, and there's reason for that. That is an earthquake region, and that certainly affected the building. The miracle of the architecture is the dome uses the concept of what they call pillars and pendentif. Pendentif is a Latin word that means hanging. Before that, like if you go to Rome and you look at the ancient Roman building of the Pantheon, which is a domed building, to support that dome, the walls are 20 feet thick. Well, that is not so in Hagia Sophia. The engineers figured out a different way, and the pillars and the pendentifs is it. There is another Byzantine church in Italy, Ravenna, Italy, St. Vitali, and many of the mosaics that were stripped out of Hagia Sophia over the centuries, you can see literally in picture story very similar mosaics in the St. Vitaly Church. St. Vitaly Church has a very different configuration. It was an octagon. It was turned into a museum after the Muslims had turned it into a mosque. Mehmet II felt that spiritual energy, and it remained the primary mosque of what is now present-day Istanbul for 12 or 14 years, I believe. And it was later that the mosaics and the artwork were covered up. And it would remain a mosque for close to 400 years. And then at the turn of the century, Turkey would experience a social and political revolution with Ataturk in the 20s. And then at that time, Hagia Sophia was turned into a museum. It was a museum pretty much like many cultural centers of the world, because it belongs not just to the Orthodox and not just to the Ottomans, but it in fact belongs to the world. But my opinion, and it's just an opinion, and I think it's shared by many Orthodox, is that it should go back to its original configuration of what it was designed to do, and why it was there in the first place. Earthquakes, earthquakes, earthquakes. The first one was 5 years after Hagia Sophia was built and brought down the dome. It was replaced. There were two more, one in the 9th century and one in the 13th century. And then one, and I was going to call my seismologist friend to find out more about it, but in 1998, there were earthquakes not only in Istanbul, but elsewhere in the world. Well, remarkably, most of the modern buildings throughout Istanbul came tumbling down. What remained? Hagia Sophia. What else remained? Some of the other Orthodox churches, and also the Islamic world was paying attention to the considerable aesthetic contributions of Hagia Sophia. For instance, if you go across the mall, you'll see the Blue Mosque, which is a famous building in its own right. And the Blue Mosque was built in the 17th century, and it is a spectacular building, no question about it. But many of the configurations and the architectural details owe a very direct debt to Hagia Sophia, which predates it by close to, well, more than 1,000 years. So it is quite an amazing church in so many ways. I would visit Hagia Sophia, as I said before, about 14 years ago, and it was a Turkish tour guide. And so it was a Turkish point of view. I was a guest, so I came to listen and learn what I could. She pointed to the central dome. And the central dome, the Pantocrator figure had, and historians are not even clear when it disappeared. But we know probably, after the Ottoman took over the building. But what remained were the four seraphims, and the tour guide explained, oh, they are the four caliphs of Islam. They're not. They're not. And you can go to an Orthodox church to this day, and the seraphim will be there, as well as Pantocrator. And so where will we go with this? I do not know. I think that the restoration would, again, come about by a British team in 1932, Thomas Whitman. He was with the Byzantine Institute, and he labored in restoring what mosaics he could until 1935. The work began, but it would continue for an additional 18 years. I think that when Hagia Sophia was designated as a World Cultural Heritage Site, that is where the money to restore much of the building came from. What many people and many Orthodox people don't realize is that the Turkish government, the Minister of Cultural Affairs, matched the funds of the restorations. So the Turkish government had an investment in the restoration of the building. Now, why would that be? It was not, at that point, it was deemed a museum, no longer a church, no longer a mosque. We know why that is. That it happens all over the world with World Heritage Sites. I think that the building itself is architecturally, 4 pillars could not hold a dome of that size. It's about 180 feet high when you stand on the floor and you look up at the dome. It's spectacular. It truly is. What holds that dome together is other domes. And if you look at the external of the photographs of the building, you'll see that. And they are what they call half domes. And what they do is they absorb some of the stress, vertical stress and horizontal stress of the tremendous weight of the dome itself. The dome was covered in copper, and one of the restoration efforts was to repair that because it was leaking and starting to destroy the inner workings of the building and also the artwork that it contained. So when you care for such a building, and I think that it was recognized by the Turkish government to be such a monument of human achievement, but to turn it back into a mosque, I don't truly understand that myself. I think a better move would be to turn it back into an Orthodox church. But I think that the prayers of the Orthodox faith throughout the world, we don't know how God works. We don't know his time frame. It's different than ours. But we do know that he hears our prayers. And I think it's well worth our attention and our prayers to restore Hagia Sophia as the Orthodox Church that it was meant to be. It's glorious. It truly is. And it will be even more glorious with prayers. When Justinian first walked into the building, the first Hagia Sophia, as I told you before, was both a civic center and a religious center. But here, Justinian laid his sword and his crown in the narthex, and he entered the sacred building as another person of prayer. That's the power of this building. Let's keep that in mind, and let's keep Hagia Sophia in our prayers. Thank you for listening.